Okay, we're coming up on the end of the semester, and we are going to have a capstone project where you implement something of your choice according to some criteria, and and we'll get into the details of that. But if you are going to create an application of your own, one thing that you're going to want to know is, how do I distribute that application? Can I give somebody some file that they can just put on their desktop, double-click it, and it'll run, without giving them having to install Eclipse and all that kind of stuff? And the answer is yes. It's an executable jar file. In order to create one of those things, if you're using images and other resource files that are separate from Java code in your project, there are certain things that you're going to have to set up from the beginning to make it all work. And so this video is a demonstration of what you would need to do to include resources in your project and then turn it into an executable jar file that they can just run on their desktop without installing anything on their computer. And so then you can just email that jar file to them, they double click it, and your program will run. So I have started by just creating the basic JFrame. So I created a project, I created a class. In the class, I created a main method that does all the normal things. I've set up the width and height. And so if I run it, it doesn't do anything extra special. It's just going to open a window. Okay, a window that's 600 by 800. So if I'm going to use images in this application, I'm going to need to go to the source folder and right-click, go to New, and where it says Package, okay, I want to create a new package for this project, and I'm going to call that package Resources. I'm going to say Finish. And I notice now under the source folder, I've got the default package, and then I've got this little thing, and it's white, it's not brown, but it says Resources, and there's nothing in it. Okay. If I then go to the folder for this project, so I've got the folder for the project. I called my project, final project. I'm in the workspace for it, and right now it's the only project in the workspace. So there's a folder for that project. If I open it up, I've got my source folder and my bin folder. Inside of the source folder is all our Java code, but now it's got not just the Java code, but a resources folder. So now if I go into that resources folder, any resources that I need to include in my executable jar file, so I don't have to distribute my program as a program and a bunch of other things, I just distribute one file. Anything that I want to be just sort of bundled up into that one executable jar file, I'm going to put into that resources folder. And so I've got an image that I'm going to display in my program. I'm going to put in that image into that resources folder. Now if I go back into Eclipse and I refresh, okay, I'm going to right click on the folder and go to refresh or hit F5. It shows the little arrow and I can say, oh, okay, there's that image. Now I want to display that image in my program. Okay, so I have added a constructor. Okay, so I've added a variable, my image, and in the constructor I initialize it. Now, to read an image from a file, you've got to do an image.io.read, and you give it a file. Now, in the past, I think I've had a constructor for a file, and I gave it a file name. But if you've got something in this resources folder, the way to get it, you say get class dot get resource, and I think I got an extra set of parentheses that I don't need. I get a resource and then I give it the path to the file. And if I've created this resources package inside of the source folder, then all I have to do is say /resources/ and then the name of the file that I'm trying to open. So what this does, this opens that file from the resources package. Okay, so this is treated like a little package inside of our project. And that package will get bundled up when we, with the rest of the stuff when we turn it into an executable jar file. And so this is the way to get and open things that are all a part of the same executable jar file. This opens the image. It has to be surrounded in a try-catch because it's trying to open a file. And whenever you try to open a file, there's a possibility of it throwing some sort of exception, like you don't have the right file permissions, or maybe the file doesn't exist, or whatever. In our case, we know it exists, we know we have the file permissions, so we don't really need to do anything at all in the catch loop, or catch part, because it'll never actually get there. But we still have to add the try-catch, because the image.io.read is a method that may throw an exception, and Java will complain if we don't have the try-catch there. So that initializes the image, and then in Paint, I just added a line that draws the image. And so now, when I run it, it draws the image of my daughter. Isn't that pretty? All right, so before you start thinking that the only thing we'll ever put in that resources folder is images, there are really two other types of things that I have used a lot in the past, and there are many kinds of things that you might add as resources. But the two types of things that I have added to programs is sound files, WAV files, or MP3s, anything with a sound for sound effects, or sometimes files that contain separate special fonts. Okay, so when you run a program on a Windows machine, it's got Windows fonts. When you run it on a Mac, it's going to have Mac fonts. And if you want that program to look the same, regardless of the platform, you've got to add your own fonts. And you can get a lot of really special, really cool looking fonts. I usually use what's called TrueType fonts, and you can download them off the internet. There are thousands of them, hundreds of thousands of them available for free off the internet. If you just go to Google and type in TrueType fonts, some of the first websites, maybe not the Wikipedia site, but this one, Fonts 101 or 1001. I like 1001. This is literally thousands of free fonts. And so, oh, that looks pretty. I'm going to download this one. And I'm going to use this font in my program. So I'm going to click on download, and when it comes to me, I'm just going to show it in the folder. We've got a zip file. Okay, I've got to get to what the TTF file inside of that if I'm going to use TrueType fonts. I want to go back to my resources folder, and I'm going to move that zip file into my resources folder and then unzip it. And I'm going to go into that folder, and this TTF file, that's the only one you need. This PNG, that's just an image, is probably a preview. The license, that's some legal stuff. We don't care about that. I'm going to do a Control-C, Control-X, and then go back up a directory, a Control-V to paste it. We've got our TTF file, and then I'm going to delete the other junk because I really don't want any extra junk in my project that I don't need. Okay, so I've added the TrueType font to the resources folder. I've created a variable of type font, my font, in the class. I've added a little bit inside of the try-catch. So the first line for the image, that's for opening the image. For opening a font, it's a little more complicated. I have to create a URL. And so this part for creating the URL is essentially the same as this part for opening the image, except that I've given it the name of the TrueType font file. And then I create the font, font.createFont, tell it it's a TrueType font, give it the name of the URL, and say OpenStream. So when I create a font, I have to tell it what kind of font, and I give it a URL that has been opened. It's a little interesting, but that's the way they did it. That font will have a height that is very, very small. If I want a bigger font, I have to derive a new font from that. So I take my font and I derive a font 100, and then I have to give it an F. That F is important. That tells it it's a floating point number. So I derive the font, and I just overwrite the old font. So 100 is a really big font. And then inside of my paint method, if I want to look this text to look nice, I have to have a rendering hint that tells it to do anti-aliasing on text. If I don't do that, my text will look like junk. And so these lines here are for making the text look better on the screen. I set the font in the graphics object. Whoa. So these lines here, including this one, are for making the text look better on the screen. This draws the image. This sets the font to this new font that I've chosen, the one that I've loaded from the TTF or TrueType font file that I downloaded off the internet. This just sets the graphics color to white so that my text will be white. And then I draw a piece of text on the screen. So now when I run my app, it says that my daughter is awesome. And she is. So to package this and make it an executable, you go to File, Export, Export Java runnable jar file. You give it a destination, and I'm just going to browse. I'm going to stick this on my desktop. So I'll put it on the desktop, give it a file name. I'll just call it awesome. And it'll say awesome.jar. I'm going to say package required libraries into the jar file. For the launch configuration, I'm just going to set it to something cool, final project, finish. So where is that awesome jar file? There it is. I just start typing it and it highlights it. And it's got the little Java icon. If I double click it, it should run. Cross my fingers and hope. There it is. Woohoo! So now I could email that to somebody. They put it on their desktop, they run it on their computer, and as long as they've got the Java runtime environment installed on their computer, they can run it. They don't need the JDK, the Java Development Kit. They don't need Eclipse. All they need is the Java platform, and they can run the JRE, Java Runtime Environment, or sometimes called the JVM, Java Virtual Machine. So, what have I talked about? Including resources, TrueType fonts, distributing an application. I should say also including resources, and I'm going to put in round brackets images. And I'll have another video with a little bit about types and operators. That's something we did talk about, but I think there are some tricky details that really should be clarified. Otherwise, you're going to run into some issues that might cause you to struggle for a very long time. And I want to make sure that you're aware of these details so that they don't cause you a lot of aggravation. So I'll talk a little bit about that, and then I'm going to introduce hash maps, the last new and interesting data structure that we're going to talk about. So there'll be a couple more videos. Thanks for watching. and have fun.